Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Your host today is founder and president of Top Mexico Real Estate, Thomas Lloyd. Thomas Lloyd is a graduate of Purdue University Craner School of Management. He's been working professionally in Mexico since 1995, and in 2011, he was the first person ever to obtain a national regulated real estate degree in Mexico. Thomas founded Top Mexico Real Estate to ensure Americans and Canadians have the best experience when purchasing and investing in real estate in Mexico. Welcome to this webinar, and let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for clicking in to watch our webinar this afternoon. Today's going to be exciting because we're going to be talking about FAQs, frequently asked questions, everything to do about buying real estate down in Mexico, whether it's the beachfront, whether you're 100 kilometers inland. This is what we're talking about today. So I'm excited about it because of our guests and because of this topic, because these are the questions that we receive here at Top Mexico. We receive this on a constant basis, these questions. Very valid, very important, but now we're going to be having our guest today is Gerardo Gonzalez. Gerardo Gonzalez is the CEO and practicing partner of a top real estate law firm here in Mexico. It's an international law firm, and they are experts in real estate law. They also cover immigration issues for foreigners down here in Mexico, and the whole round topics having to do with us foreigners coming down to Mexico to retire. So Gerardo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Thomas.
And I want to point out one other thing here. Gerardo is actually a notary public. So this is, let me explain real quick what exactly a notary public, because in the States and in Canada, the notary public has a lot of responsibilities, and they are there basically to witness signatures and make sure that the people signing the papers, they're the actual person signing. Down in Mexico, a notary public is so much more than this. First of all, only notary publics, only the governor of a state can assign who is going to be a notary public. And they are highly trained legal experts. They have the authority to validate real estate transactions, contracts, and official documentation. So you have a notary public to be part of your purchasing, your investing process here in Mexico. By law, you need a notary public there to assure that the process is legally recorded and everything is done correct. So Gerardo, thank you for being with us so you can answer a lot of our questions that we have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we jump into the questions with Gerardo, I just wanted to, why are we here? There are so many Americans and Canadians and Europeans who are now choosing Mexico as their retirement destination. I'm impressed with the stats. If you read the stats, you will be impressed too. You'll be excited. Since 2000, there was approximately 300,000 Americans, Canadians buying real estate down here in Mexico, living down in Mexico. In 2010, that jumped up to 738,000. Now in 2020 and 2025, that figure just keeps escalating up. Now, in my opinion, from all the context, from the people that I talk with, people from La Paz, people from Mérida, people in Playa del Carmen, the numbers are, in my opinion, they're even much higher. And one of the reasons, the difference with what you see from statistics and what you'll be looking at here in our graphs is that there's a ton of American Canadians who are buying their real estate, but they haven't moved down here yet. They buy the real estate to take advantage of the lower price, say in 2025, and maybe they're not retiring till 2020 or 2030, but they want to lock into the pricing right now. So when they are in full retirement, now they don't have to pay that extra appreciation that's occurred over the last 5 years. And believe me, the appreciation in important retirement destinations, the appreciation is chugging along at a very good and strong rate. So it makes sense, this strategy. It is smart way to retire, smart way to invest and continue growing your wealth by this trends going on in Mexico. So what is bringing a lot of Americans, Canadians down here to Mexico? Obviously the weather, obviously the beautiful, incredible views that you have down here in Mexico. But another important factor is the cost of living. It's only 45% difference. What you spend on a month-to-month basis up there in the States compared to down here in Mexico. And another reason too is today's world, the ability to continue working, the ability to continue staying in touch with your family, with your friends and everything, and that tech has just increased tremendously. So now you have Starlink. You have Starlink, so you can be in a remote place, off the grid, and still have that connectivity right there at your fingertips. Solar panels, now you're not super needed to have electricity. So this technology is really increasing tremendously, and it's opening up a ton of options for us Americans, Canadians who want to come down to Mexico. So those are two other factors that are bringing a lot of Americans, Canadians to continue this incredible growth of us retiring down here to Mexico. Okay, so Mexico is ranked #1 among 53 destinations in the publication by the Expat Insider, a 2024 survey. Their survey is called the Ease of Settling In, and it says that 90% of expats in Mexico say they are happy with their life living down here in Mexico. And that's much higher than the global average of 72%. So those are interesting data there that our team has been collecting. Another thing for retirees, reports show that a comfortable lifestyle down here in Mexico can be maintained for around $2,000 a month. And this obviously depends on what city you're going to be moving into, Cabo San Lucas versus Merida versus Playa del Carmen, Tulum, etc. But what is very impressive is the cost of living in general down here in Mexico is easily getting about 45% less than up in the States. You add it up yourself. What are the insurance costs if you have a property in Florida, for example? What's the HOA's fees? And just the cost of a loaf of bread or beer. Compare that to what it costs down here in Mexico, you will quickly see that difference in savings, a pleasant surprise, huge savings. So enough about what's going on, what's exciting about Mexico, why so many millions of people are coming down to Mexico. Let's jump into questions that you've been sending to us, and that on a day-to-day basis, these are the type of questions that many people have in buying real estate down in Mexico. So the first section we'll talk about are the real estate type of questions. Questions such as, can foreigners actually buy property in Mexico? Gerardo, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of interesting information, by the way. You always come with these interesting facts that I appreciate to know. Sometimes you don't realize all that information.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, foreigners who legally buy property in Mexico, although there is a restriction, the bank trust needs to be created. Because if you buy property in what is called the restricted area in Mexico, which is 50 kilometers from the Mexican, 100 kilometers from the Mexican borders, 50 kilometers from the Mexican coast, which a lot of the most interesting areas, such as Puerto Vallarta, Campeche, Quintana Roo, Cabo San Lucas, all those areas that are really interesting for the market. You need to create what is called a bank trust. With that, we help you with all this process, but I'm going to explain how it works. Basically, in Mexico, and I like to explain what the reason why this rule exists. It has everything to do with the Mexican history. When we lose part of our territory on the past, back then we changed the Mexican constitution to prohibit at all for foreigners to buy property in Mexico, within that area. However, many years passed, and there were a lot of interest in for foreigners in investing, buying within these areas. So what Mexico did is to create a law that will regulate, protect the interests of foreigners that are investing on these areas. Basically, if a foreigner would like to buy a lot, any type of land, a lot, an apartment on this area, they need to create a bank trust. In Mexico, the bank trusts are regulated and controlled by banks. So every bank trust that holds property in Mexico, the one who regulates and controls that are banks. This was done in that way to provide certainty to the transactions that are actually institutions that are regulated by the government, the ones who control this all these type of transactions,
Okay.
And that's the reason why it's mandatory, basically.
Okay. Fantastic. So basically, you Americans, Canadians, yes, you can buy a beachfront property. So number two, the second question that we hear a lot, could you summarize quickly the main steps for purchasing? So I'm going to jump in and in my point of view, basically I'll try to resume this real quick, but 10 steps. One, start with finding a real estate team, a real estate agent, someone that has credentials, that has years of experience and testimonials. So credentials, so you can see that these people, they are focused, they're concerned about your interests, your money, they know the legalities. So people that have studied. For example, there's a professional identification number. I was actually the first person in Mexico that attained a Mexico real estate degree. And with that, I was able to get a professional identification number. And with this license, I can basically practice real estate any state down here in Mexico. And then the years of experience, it's great. It's absolutely necessary to study books and study all the laws and everything. But the years of experience, there's so many different issues, so many things you confront on a month-to-month basis. There's always something new, and so if you work with a team that has been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, they have experienced a lot of different scenarios. So that just makes sense on who to work with, who's a good team. You're creating your real estate team. And then testimonials that make sure that the other clients over the past years have been absolutely satisfied. Okay, 2, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. 2, share your wish list. Once you have that contact, share your wish list, share your budget with your agent. That's going to make his and your effectiveness, efficiency a lot quicker. So he's understanding exactly what your dreams are, what your concerns are, and he can send that to you. So by this, step 3, he creates a good itinerary of different properties that when you come down, you can have a very effective visit to look at different properties that match your wish list. In this time before you come down, and step number 4, study up about what are the legalities. Webinars like this one. This is super valuable webinar. I'm going to let Gerardo take over a little bit more here, but study up. We have a ton of ebooks here on the website to understand what you're going to, once you find that property, now you don't have to slow down and say, oh, what do we do in case of this happens? When you're making your decision on what property to invest upon, you know a lot of the facts already. So, and we make that as simple as possible with our ebooks and kits and all the videos that we do. Also look at the acquisition cost. What's the estimated closing cost? So you know if you're still in that budget that you're looking for when you buy a property. Step 5, come on down, do the tour, touch it, feel it yourself, and see those details that there's nothing like touching a property and feeling it and walking through it. Okay, number 6, once you find that property, put in an offer to purchase. 2, that's followed by, we always recommend working with a good lawyer, a buyer's lawyer. Sometimes you'll see sellers or developers that say, you don't have to worry about a lawyer. We have our own developer, but it's always makes sense to have your own lawyer look over the promissory contract to watch out your interests, your money on your behalf. Step 7, that offer to purchase within about 2 weeks, that gets replaced or enhanced by a promissory contract. For me, that's the hard copy. That's the Bible. That there has all the definitions of what you're purchasing, when you're going to get it delivered, et cetera, et cetera. That's where your lawyer steps in. That's where a team like Mix Law, they step in and do a heck of a job. During the promissory contract, you have a choice if you want to do a bank trust, like what Gerardo explained just a bit ago, or if you want to set up a corporation. We're going to go into the details what works best for you in such scenario. Step 8, now that we have the promissory contract, now that we're ready to go to the title, then we have to go with the notary public to sign for the title. And again, here's Gerardo. You're probably going to run into him in the near future when you invest in real estate. You need the notary public there to oversee all the transaction and the paperwork. Everything that the seller brings is up to date, and everything that the buyer is bringing is money and his documentation. Step 9, take the keys, take possession, and then you have about, it could be from 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 months. The notary takes all the paperwork. Once he has it put on the seal, he then takes it to the public registry, which is a final step. That's the good step. That's now your property is now registered in public registry where everybody has access to it. That's a final step for your real estate investments down in Mexico. Okay, now, number 3 question, FAQ. What are some of the most common mistakes retirees make when purchasing property in Mexico? So maybe 2 or 3, Gerardo, what do you think some of those common mistakes are for foreigners?
You mentioned something really important, and I think it's crucial. When clients often ask that, I always tell them, and I always consider that to avoid getting into a situation, or not pleasant situation, or a problem in here, I tell the clients, do what you would do back home, which is what you mentioned, get the professionals to help you out. People that actually have been in for years in the business, that know what they're doing, that they're reputable real estate lawyers, that actually know about the market, the players, the rules, so that is what I've seen often, that they sometimes they go and maybe they don't get the right team on their side, and later on, with stuff could be not going in the right way, and they need to have a team that knows what they know, how to respond, what to do when, In your case, your team is awesome. I know since the beginning, and we have been working together for years and never had any situation. Why? Because in both sides, your team asks all the right questions. For example, what is included? You say appliances in here, but what do you mean by appliances? What do you know this? And it's important to have both sides coordinated, that they both know what they're doing, because in our side as lawyers, we get just the document. We don't see the property. We don't know even where this property is located and which floor. And so both sides are important, because when on the real estate side, on the broker side, they go there, they check it. You see appliances, what appliances are in here and stuff, and then we receive the documentation, whatever it's what the agreement there, that the real estate or the brokers got. Then we need to talk to each other and understand exactly what's the dealing, because we want to make sure that the appliances, and we receive a list of stuff that they're there, conditions that they agreed at that moment, and then you or your team tell us the input, and then we put the legal part, and then we make sure that whatever was agreed on those first steps, it's actually reflected on the contract, and protects the client later. And then we add our part, which is now that the client already chose the property, that I know, for example, that in your case, a team like yours won't recommend any developer that is starting and is getting finance, doesn't know what they're doing, which they are really good new ones, but it's always good to know exactly what is the background of this developer, like you will do back home, exactly the same, sometimes I feel like, to summarize, that clients, when they come, thinks that rules are different and are exactly the same. You get the right team, you get the right results.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even like what you're mentioning there, putting that experience to work, I know for example, our offer to purchase format, it's extensive. There's a lot of pages, but Gerardo, you and I, we were a lot more proactive than reactive, and it's a lot better for you. You probably have to do a little bit more legwork at the beginning when you're preparing that offer and purchase, but it brings out all those details, the devil's in the details, and I prefer that we discover that at the very beginning, before me and the buyers, we get too involved in it or investing too much time and investing too much money at the beginning. And then 60 days later, we find out, we forgot the seller forgot to mention that. And so the deal's off. So yeah, that's experience going to work for you guys, your money and things. Question number 4 is, are there specific types of properties or communities that work better for retirees? I'm going to jump in, and Gerardo, you feel free. It depends. I mean, there's so many different tastes. Some of you, I'm going to come down to Mexico. I want off the grid. I want to be in the back. I want to have the entire beach just to myself. And then you have others that, I enjoy amenities. I want to have a golf course right there in front of me, tennis courts, lighted tennis courts, restaurants right there, walkable to distance. So it's what should retirees look for when choosing. So it really I think 80% of the answer to that is, what are you looking for? What excites you? This is an adventure. This is a fun part of the year, fun part of the life. And I know I get that conversation a lot is, I want to experience. I love experiencing new things, new people, new little communities in Mexico and things. And so I invite you. And it's not only can you have adventure of experiencing these new locations and things, but you can make money off of it too, because that appreciation, Mexico is just chugging along and the economy is just growing and growing. And so that's a good place to park your money. Gerardo, any ideas on that?
And well, I guess because I know you for a while now, no, and I think well, to answer that will be on on your side, no, you will know what area is better, and what the clients are looking for. My part will be just the legal side or the legal aspect, making sure that everything is in there. However, I do consider that you, as you mentioned, not just on the daily basis operation, or when you get clients, I think you are really proactive, looking for new places and discovering new interesting places for your clients, and developing and getting together communities to explore and to develop. That it's something that I need to acknowledge, and I need to applaud that. You're Thomas. It's really a pioneer in some of the areas, and a lot of the clients, when you invited them to invest in areas that maybe weren't that popular, but you saw something and you explored, and they got the results of more than what they were expecting. Actually, the problem was for me, because they got too much capital gains that we're going to talk later about that. So they have a lot of profit that they need to make sure that we lower the taxes, but it's a good problem to have, honestly.
That's exactly right. And I'm actually, this morning I was talking with some good people from Florida, and we're talking about them. They love Yucatan section, but they also want to do a bit of investing and in Campeche. So you can see the difference in prices. So they're doing a double thing. They're going to be retiring to Yucatan Merida, but then they also going to be doing some investment, which is smart thinking. So another question that we have, is it better to buy pre-construction, resale, or land when planning for retirement? A little bit of what I just said there. It depends on, what your goals are. It's pre-construction. It depends when you're going to be living down here full time, or if you're going to rent, if you want to take advantage of the tourism. Tourism's the number one money generator for all of Mexico. There's just millions of tourists from Europe, from USA, Canada, that come down here on an annual basis. It's incredible. And so a lot of a simple strategy that some Americans and Canadians do is, I want to buy now. I'm not retiring for about 5 years, but I'm going to buy now while the price is still here. If I wait to 2030, the price is going to be way up here. I might as well put that money to work right now. And you know what? Let me rent it. I'm still working up in Canada. Let me rent it for that time period. I'm earning extra revenues off of that property. And then when I'm going to start using it 6 months out of the year, or living full time down in Mexico, man, I don't have to lose my wealth on the property that I should have bought 5 years ago. So that's something to keep in your mind. Don't look at this as just, I want a retirement destination. Think of your wealth, think of your kids' wealth, because we're, a lot of us are working for our kids, right, Gerardo? We're doing those investments and things, and they get to inherit all of it. But the same with you guys. It's for me, some of the things I get into conversation with people is, up in the States, for example, man, the competition is tough to find an opportunity even in your local market. It's tough because you probably have 50 competition already zoning and identify that property, and for you to find it and move quick to pick it up, and the margins are not that huge. But down here in Mexico, you still don't quite have all that competition. So you can find opportunities, grab it, and exactly what Gerardo mentioned before, your appreciation potential in there, that problem that you want to have in the future of, man, I got a lot of capital earnings or appreciation. Now, how do I tackle the taxes on that? So that's the kind of problems that we look for, we hope to get. Questions, FAQs. The first one is, what exactly is the bank trust and how does it work? Why is it mandatory, Gerardo?
Okay. It's mandatory. It's by law. No, it's in the Mexican Constitution. No, we need to provide a way for foreigners to acquire the property. No, so in this case, the option that the Mexican or the law, the foreign investment law gave for foreigners to acquire property safely in Mexico is actually to create a bank trust. As I mentioned before, in Mexico, the banks are the institutions that were designated by the government to regulate all these type of transactions.
So let me ask you a question, Gerardo. So that's the bank trust is required if you're within 50 kilometers of the beach. Now,
Correct.
What happens if you're buying in 90 kilometers from the beach and I'm a Canadian buying a property? How does that work?
Absolutely. Oh, in that case, they buy normal. You know, the only let's put it like this: the only difference between a foreign buying after that 50 kilometers is then you need to notify to foreign investment. You know, there's a notification that you send, and once they acknowledge, you follow exactly the same process as any other Mexican. There's no real restriction, just this later that you need to send to them.
Okay. And so, and the other difference, the bank trust doesn't cost that much. It costs about $500. It depends on the bank that you work with, but about $500, right?
The annual cost, no, to create the bank trust, it's the cost is around $2,000, no? Depending on the bank, as you mentioned, and then there's an annual fee that you pay to the bank that it's around $450, $500. What I really like from the because yes, there's this extra cost if you consider let's put it like that, if you compare to with buying in Canada and the US, because you need to have this extra legal vehicle. However, which is really important with what I really like from our clients to having a bank trust is how easy it is to inherit the property, to their heirs. On the bank trust, you have who is the beneficiary. So maybe it's a couple, both of them they're beneficiary, but really important. You mentioned who is or are going to be the beneficiaries in case of death. So normally, if it's a couple with 2 kids, for example, we said, both of them are beneficiaries and they're also beneficiaries mutually. So if one of them died, the other gets the property. But if both die at the same time, they're going to be designing, the kids 2 or 1 or whatever, whoever they want, to become the new beneficiary of that trust. But that process does not go to the Mexican judicial system. That it's because it's controlled by a bank or an institution that Mexico designated meant for that. Is really easy because it's just paperwork. You go to the bank, you show that you are the beneficiary in case of death, and there's some paperwork there, the death certificate of the beneficiary, and basically paperwork from the bank. You go to the notary, they transfer the right to the new beneficiary, and that will be all. Obviously, MexLaw will help you. You don't go to the bank, actually, you come to a lawyer, and we submit all the information, but it's basically how it works. Right. So easy. It's even easier than what Mexicans need to do. Honestly, I really like that, because when you're purchasing property in another country, when maybe you are not that familiar with all the legalities around that, and you have your heirs maybe back in home, and you don't want to inherit a problem to them, give you peace of mind that if something happens, it's going to be so easy for them to get the property, to get the rights, and then they decide what to do with it. And another clause on this inherit thing, on how to transfer the property to your heirs, is that there is no tax on when you receive property, when you inherit property in Mexico. So if you give that property to your sons, to your kids, then they won't pay any capital gains on this, or on whatever amount is they receive, or the cost of the property.
Well, that's a very good to know. That's a very good factor. Now, Gerardo, how many people can be? I know the typical is a husband and a wife, they're the first beneficiaries, but can you have 10 people on that first beneficiary?
Absolutely, we have a couple of clients, friends, they say they like a property together, we could put 2 couples, 3 couples, or one person, one individual, doesn't make any difference. We could do it as they would like to organize it.
Okay. Okay, the next question is, if the bank holds the property, what right does the foreign buyer actually have? What's he restricted with ownership through a bank?
I really like that question, because there's a lot of misleading information on the internet, which sometimes is not accurate, and sometimes I think it provides with some let's leave it at misleading information, which maybe provides with I don't know, uncertainty to transactions, or foreigners might think that will be the case, and it is not really. Any foreigner buying property with a bank trust in Mexico has the same rights as any other Mexican with a property in Mexico. You are not less as an owner, or because I have a bank trust. They're protected by the same constitution, by the same rights, So I get the 2 questions that I get often are the Mexican government could take my property? No, they won't, and yes, technically speaking, by the constitution, the Mexican government could take your property, as they could with any other Mexican. If they need to build a road, it needs to be a major, reason, of developing Mexico, because it's something that is interesting for the country. But if you're buying a lot, the apartment, or anything that is, on the city, there's no chances that the Mexican government could take your property just because you own through a bank trust. Another thing, because it's a bank and it's a Mexican bank, or a bank within the Mexican system, because we have international banks in Mexico, HSBC, Santander, Scotiabank. What happens if the bank goes bankrupt? This is not an asset of the bank. It's not an asset. So basically, if, let's say, the worst case scenario, bank goes bankrupt, the only thing that will happen is, instead of being with the bank, you are with Scotiabank. The Scotiabank goes bankrupt, there's a bankruptcy law, a process established. So instead of being with Scotiabank, there's a process, and let's say the Mexican government decides that the HSBC is going to be the one who's going to absorb all those, instead of being with this bank, it's going to be with this another bank. Conditions are going to remain the same. There's no increase on the price. There's no increase in anything. The conditions, they respect the conditions for the clients.
Okay, fantastic. And just to resume that, so if I'm the owner and I buy the property here on the beach and it's held with a bank trust, I can still sell it. I can get a lease on it. I can rent it. I can improve upon it. So all of that with a bank trust, just like you said, that we're just like a Mexican national. We have all rights.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you need a permission from the bank to build whatever? No. No, they have no. There's no. They're there, no, to hold the property with you as a trust. However, no, that doesn't mean that they control what you do with your property. It's up to you, no, whatever you want to do with it.
And let's see the other question. There is a time limit on the bank trust, which is 50 years. So what happens, say I'm getting to year 49, what occurs? What happens?
Yes, sometimes I get clients that they maybe a bit concerned about the 50 years. Just putting in perspective, 50 years is a lot of time. It's half of a human life. So yes, this has a limit of time. 50 years. What will happen if someone gets into that time limit? You just extend for another 50 years, and that will be it. We have one of the oldest trusts, and let's see that happen. They already got to the limit of time, and we just send a letter, extended the time, and that's it.
Yeah, quite simple, very efficient process. And how much does a bank trust cost each year? We talked a little bit about that. And do buyers get to choose which bank acts as their trustee?
Absolutely. Client chooses which bank would like them to work with. We have a few recommendations. Personally speaking, we have some banks that are more focused on foreigners. So we recommend to use them. Rather than other major banks, because it's a minor market for the bigger banks, so maybe they take more time. But if a client comes and tells me, Gerardo, I want this bank, absolutely we'll do it. We just ask them to be a bit more patient about it.
And okay, this is a good question. Do all properties in Mexico require a bank trust, or only those in the restricted zones like coastal areas?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the question is, do all properties in Mexico require a bank trust, or only those in the restricted zones?
Yes, absolutely. Just the ones on the restricted zones. Aside from that, it's just a permit that you send. Notification. It's not a permit. A notification that a foreigner is buying, outside of the restricted area, and that will be it.
Okay. Now, what? Say we are outside of the restricted zone, but we still would love to hold the property with a bank trust. Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And
maybe taking advantage of the beneficiary in case of death. So you bypass the Mexican judicial system. Absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, once I decide to buy, how long does it take to set up the bank trust and complete the closing process?
Okay, to create a bank trust, once we get the file and we need to perform the due diligence, making sure that everything is there, that the information that we get either from the developer or from the seller, makes sense with the public records, they match, and also we perform a complete due diligence on this documentation. While we do that, we start getting all the paperwork, sending all the paperwork to the bank and to foreign affairs to start putting the bank trust together. I would say normally we have an average of 45 days. It's the time frame that the lawyers has to do a closing. This is once we get the entire information. Maybe if they take some time to send the information, it might take a bit more, but in average, I would say that.
Okay, now when is a good time? Because inside of the restricted zone, a foreigner has an option. They can set up a bank trust, or they could actually set up a Mexican corporation, and the Mexican corporation acquires the property. So what's the rule of thumb? When should we use a corporation? When should we use a bank trust?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Aside from the bank trust option, there is another option, which is to create a Mexican corporation, and that Mexican corporation will hold the property in your behalf. No? Some rules over there. You need to a minimum of 2 shareholders in a Mexican corporation. No? So must be at least two shareholders. And both of them could be foreigners. No, there's a lot of information on the internet that said, no, I need to partner with a Mexican. That is not accurate. Both of the shareholders could be foreigners, absolutely. No, and that company would hold property. When would us recommend a client to consider the corporate information? It's when they are buying a few properties, when they maybe said, I like to buy 3, 4, 5, 6. No, we have clients that they bought 25 properties. And so in those cases, the corporation is something that they should consider. No, really, well, as everything depends on a case to case, but in the average or the in general, that will start making sense once we see that this client, they're planning in the future to actually invest heavily in Mexico, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 properties, And the reason is this, the bank trust, we mentioned $2,000, and then there's an annual fee of $450 to $500 a year, but that is per property. So if you get 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, you need to multiply that $450 by the number of properties that you own. If you have a Mexican company or corporation, yes, you need to submit taxes in Mexico in a monthly basis, and to do so, you need to have a Mexican accountant that is going to charge you around $500 a year. But the good thing about that is that doesn't matter how many properties do you hold with that company, because basically the cost will be the same. So the corporation options start to make sense once you have plenty properties in here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now we're going to switch into questions that have to do with closing costs and capital gains tax. And the first one, what are the total closing costs involved when buying a property in Mexico? Now, we don't have to go into all the details, but more or less.
Yeah. In general, it depends a bit on the area. The most important tax is the transfer tax. And some areas in Mexico, they have 1%. Some other areas have 4%. So that will really make the difference, depending on the area. But in general, I would say, let's go in the worst case scenario, talking about 4%, 5%. The client should consider, that will be the worst case scenario, between 7-8% of the purchase price. In most of that will be the worst case scenario. In most of the cases, we're talking about 6 to 7% of the purchase price.
Okay. And I know that comes up,
including everything. I said that I'm putting there the bank trust that we talk about. The transfer tax, which could be 3%. In average, is 3% in Mexico. And the notary fees and the Mexico fees, everything is considered in there.
Okay, the due diligence, that's a lot of why we highly recommend Gerardo and his team there at Mix Law. The due diligence, that's being proactive. That's what that is. So I know that this, a lot of people say, oh, wow, I compared to my closing costs up in Canada versus this. And I know that this is where we talk about, okay, you got to look at the big picture here too. The property taxes, for example, here in Mexico, it's incredible. It's so low, the property tax on a year-to-year basis, when you'll recover that extra dimes and quarters that you're paying on closing expenses. you recover in 2 years that extra that you be paying. Because, what's your opinion on that?
Absolutely. I know, as yourself, we focus, our market are the foreigners investing here in Mexico. So I know that specific part, when we come and said, okay, the closing cost is 6 to 7%, it's a shocking information, no? But to be fair, honestly, as you mentioned, what you pay in property taxes in a yearly basis is nothing. So if you see what you pay, what you're saving annually on the property taxes, and you compare with the closing cost and what you will be paying back in US or Canada, you will see that in 2-3 years you will already recover the difference.
Okay, Gerardo, folks back home, that's all the time we have right now we can't continue because we ran out of time. Unfortunately, because this has been a very, very interesting topic that we're talking about, these FAQs. Gerardo, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and sharing all of this insight, all of this legal information on how to invest in real estate down in Mexico.
Okay, Thomas, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to share some information with your clients, with your public, and anything you need, let us know.
And for everyone attending, before we go, I want to remind you, we have a freebie, and that's a PDF that we prepared for you, a cost of living comparison of some top real estate cities or regions, destinations down here in Mexico. And it is compared with cities up in the USA. So you can see, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised of what this shows. Basically, it shows that your dollar can be extended twice the amount. And that's exciting. That's where a lot of us are coming down here to Mexico to enjoy this beautiful weather and the views that we have down here, but also to be smart retirement. And Gerardo, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon and sharing all of your experience. And to our audience, remember, retiring in Mexico, it's not just a dream. There's millions of Americans, Canadians that are doing this right now as we speak. And don't forget to download that cost of living comparison. And before we wrap everything up, I want to invite you guys to share with us if you have any other topics. If you have questions, reach out to me. Reach out to Top Mexico. Send us an email. Send us a WhatsApp. Send us a phone call. Just give us a call. Ask her a question. That's why we are down here. We've helped thousands of people just like you with all of these type of questions. And that's our 20 years of experience. We know what we're doing down there. And adios, people. I'm Thomas Lloyd. This is Top Mexico Real Estate. We make it happen. Hasta luego, amigos.